Field by field, Maizex is bringing Canadian seed to farmers across Canada. Maizex is your source for high-performance soybeans and grain, silage, and grazing corn hybrids. Visit maizex.com to find your local Maizex representative.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Make sure you go to realagriculture.com/subscribe if you're not getting our emails. Love to have you getting our morning emails. We have an Eastern Canadian email, a Western Canadian email, as well as a cattle and dairy, machinery, lots of options based on your interests. Today on the program, we've got a RealAg Issues Panel, front to back. We've got a lot of issues to cover. We've got some economic news out of the U.S. and in Canada. We've got the Bank of Canada making a decision on interest rates. Some job numbers have come in as well. We're also going to talk today about the China issue, right? So China has made the decision to have an investigation when it comes to Canadian canola relative to some accusations they're making on dumping. So we'll dive into that. I've got some audio from an interview I did with one of Canada's foremost experts on China from the China Institute at the University of Alberta. We'll play some clips from that as well. So lots of stuff to discuss here today on the Issues Panel. And Kelvin, Heppner, and Lyndsey Smith will be with us to talk about all of it. Oh, and the NDP has torn up the agreement between themselves and the Liberals. So does that mean an election is coming? See, like we are loaded today. If you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Or please call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Make sure on Monday night you check out The Agronomist, hosted by Lyndsey Smith of Real Agriculture. 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain. You can find it at realagriculture.com/live or on the Real Agriculture YouTube channel where Lyndsey dives into a key agronomic topic. She's got always a great lineup of guests. And if you are a CCA, you can get CCA CEU credits for watching the program as well. We also podcast it. So if you aren't able to make it live, you can always find The Agronomist on podcast. Okay, we're going to take a break. But before we do, I do want to mention Koch Agronomic Services for agronomically effective dual UAN inhibition. The smart answer is Tribune, a nitrogen stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how its two active ingredients protect UAN from 3 forms of nitrogen loss, visit kochag.ca. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Farmers Edge Laboratories is here to support growers, agronomists, and retailers this harvest season with their soil testing. Experience superior customer service, fast results, and volume discounts with Farmers Edge Laboratories. Contact 204-233-4099, 204-233-4099, or email fe.labs@farmersedge.ca. The lab is now open to the public, agronomists, and retailers across Canada. Farmers Edge Laboratories, proudly serving Canadian agriculture for over 15 years.
We're at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. Today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef. Make sure you check out canadabeef.ca. The new campaign, Pick the Beef with the Leaf. We are joined right now by the president of Canada Beef. It is Eric Bienview. What is the true role of Canada Beef in the sector?
Essentially, 2 sentences. Create value. For whom? Our producer and the entire value chain of the beef industry. Our goal is to make beef the protein of choice. That's it. How do we do it? Consumer marketing, channel marketing, global marketing, intel, research and development on the nutrition, health, as well as the underutilized cuts to enhance the consumption. We have 300 cuts of beef. So what do? We're trying to optimize and increase value, stakeholder communication, and drive growth.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's time for the RealAg Issues Panel here on this Friday. Hey, nitrogen fertilizer is your farm's #1 expense. Farmers are working together through Genesis Fertilizers to solve the problem of high prices and security of supply by planning a state-of-the-art nitrogen plant. Security and earnings through ownership is the solution. Visit genesisfertilizers.com to learn more. Joining us here on the Issues Panel, as they always do, Lyndsey Smith out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It is Friday of the first week back to school. That has all gone well. But I am a little angry with the weather people who can't seem to get things right. And so we got rain on some hay that was about to get rolled up today. And it was not supposed to rain. And so I'm mad.
Their predictions are wrong or what?
Yes, there was a 0% chance of rain, and we 100% had rain. So anyway.
Really?
Yes.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah. In fairness, we missed the window to book the wrapper, so we kind of had to gamble for dry hay anyway, and we almost made it. So anyway, bit of a bummer, but that's making hay.
Timing is everything in farming.
Indeed.
Also joining us is Kelvin Heppner. Lyndsey, Kelvin has had a tough week. It's been, we heard from, yesterday on the Farmer Rapid Fire, Tyler Barmanovich from Manitoba was on. I don't know what's going on in Manitoba, but it hasn't been good things because everybody I talked to has breakdowns. Kelvin being another one of them. Kelvin, what happened?
Well, we were headed to the field yesterday with so we've got small acres. We still run an older John Deere combine. 9600, which I think a lot of people have memories of driving one. And
good model.
Got onto the road and put it in road gear, and no, it stopped, didn't want to move, and we've got main hydraulic pump failure, and we checked the oil, and sure enough, when you find all those brass shavings in the hydraulic oil, not a good sign. So we're probably shopping now, but we had some help from some family, and they were helping us combine this week anyway, and so we finished our canola last night. So it's not all bad, and honestly, we probably, the life expectancy of this combine is probably it's probably long surpassed. So we're
it's like the old farm dog. It's expiry days we get. It's
exactly. Yeah,
I would like to point out though, in Shaun's preamble to this, it made it sound like Kelvin had a breakdown this week. Kelvin the person is okay. It's the combine that's not so good.
Yeah.
Let's make that clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, maybe had some breakdowns too, but
maybe there may have been tears. Yeah, there may have been some tears.
Well, hey, you got to replace that combine.
Yeah,
the used market's a little bit more in your favor today than it was 2 years ago. So look at it that way, my friend. Be positive.
Yeah, exactly. And
you go straight to an X9, like hop over everything and go straight to an X9.
We were joking because the combine's dead. Do you put an X in front of it? Is it an X9600 now?
Oh,
can you use it in combine demolition derbies?
Probably couldn't. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
This is.
Although
look at all these positives.
It doesn't move right now, so. I think it would cost the same to get it into a demolition derby as it would cost to keep harvesting with it.
Yeah, but then you'd be in a demolition derby, and so that's right. Way better.
I love a good demolition derby, especially one that involves combines.
Yeah. So let us know what you decide, Kelvin. Mm-hmm.
Do you have one near you, Lyndsey, at all, the combine demolition derby?
No, but definitely there are several versions of demolition derbies out this way. Yeah, it's a thing. And they are entertaining, I would say. I like it when things smash.
I don't know if they do it anymore, but Vauxhall, Alberta had one. It was a beaut. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get to some of the big issues of the week. Lots happening in the world of agriculture. We have to start, I think, with the issues between Canada and China is probably the best place to begin. Appreciate all the feedback we got from the audience in terms of Wednesday's episode. We really tackled this issue in pretty deep regard. A lot of people talking about the interview with Chris Davison from the Canola Council of Canada. Some phenomenal comments on the YouTube channel on that interview. My favorite was running sort of relative parallel comment to what we would say in the beef industry, which would be like, we got to eat ourselves out of this. Like BSC,
Right.
we need to drink as much canola oil as we can to get through all this inventory. I was like,
I feel like they don't know what we normally do with canola oil at this point. I am not drinking any. Yeah, I don't think we should.
Yeah,
No.
it is a good, that is maybe a good one for the loser in this year's fantasy football league, though.
Oh, there you go. You have to drink a liter of canola oil.
Drink a liter of canola oil. Okay. So I guess, Kelvin, what's your take here on where we are at with this situation? They've I guess a shot across the bow, an expected shot across the bow here, but they did act quick.
Yeah, we saw action now within a week of Canada announcing those electric vehicle tariffs of 100%, and now, yeah, it was less than a week later that China came out with this investigation, anti-dumping investigation. So yeah, I think in terms of past precedents, past events, in 2019 when Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive. She was arrested in December, and Richardson and Viterra's permits for shipping to China were lifted in March, I believe. So there was a bit more of a delay that time. This time, a quicker reaction from China, but like you said, I don't think it was a surprise. We're still waiting on a lot of the details here as to what this investigation actually looks like. Whether this is a formal WTO process involving a third-party adjudicator, which would be in Canada's favor, or whether I think it's more likely it'll be a domestic process based on China's own interpretation of its own laws, defining anti-dumping and that type of thing, which leads to likely a much more arbitrary set of tariffs here. And of course, right now there's still a scenario where tariffs don't even get applied. What that would take, we don't know either. So lots of uncertainty, and certainly the market right now, the main impact has been that the market dropped and hasn't fully recovered yet this week.
And this is a different situation than the last canola incident where they removed those grain export licenses from Richardson's and Viterra that it didn't basically stopped canola raw seed exports to the country of China. This is different. This is a little bit more of a maybe rethink your position, Canada. But Lyndsey, I'm not really confident that there's a lot of appetite for Canada to back down. The fact we have the Liberals and the Conservatives both saying we're kind of for these tariffs.
So, and I think one of the things that we'll get into, and you explored on Wednesday's show, is what does Canada do now? And if we've got this runway in front of us of, China essentially has opened up this investigation, or says that they have, that means that there's the expectation that Canada will contribute, will be a part of it, will potentially have meetings and, diplomatic discussions and all of these things, right? It opens the door for that. At the same time, you're exactly right. Right now, politically, this seems like the favored way forward, regardless of potentially who's in power, and we'll, I'm sure, talk about for how long as well. The Liberals are a little bit distracted, I think, this week as well. So, we've opened up this door of, as Kelvin mentions, perhaps several months of this investigation. We'll find out soon sort of what path that's going to take, and there will be time for Canada to participate and perhaps negotiate, come to an agreement, those sorts of things. But in the meantime, if it's a hard line, no, these EV tariffs stay in place and do what you got to do, realistically, the hurt is just going to get worse and worse for Canadian canola growers, for sure.
Well, we've got an interview up at RealAgriculture.com with Philippe Rio, who is the director of the China Institute at the University of Alberta. He lived in China as a diplomat for 25 years, knows China incredibly well. I'm going to I brought some clips for us to explore here. So up first, he was a little bit critical of Canada's reasoning for applying these tariffs in the first place. Let's hear what he had to say.
If you look at the way Canada announced or decided to impose 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, the Canadian government didn't even really try that hard to pretend that it was doing any kind of a serious analysis. It just basically, it was a political move. It decided to cast its lot with the Americans. While there's no doubt that there's some support and subsidies that underpin the Chinese EV industry, it's nowhere close to 100%, right? And so to go in that direction, it certainly is going to elicit some kind of reaction, right?
I do find it kind of interesting that the Canadian government has been openly critical of some of the U.S. policies regarding tariffs over the past number of years, especially as it applies to Canadian goods trying to get into the country. And we kind of just sort of like pulled a number off the board and said 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs. We kind of pulled a bit of a Trump here, Kelvin.
Yeah, and that's where the EU took a different approach here. And that's, I believe, Michael Harvey with the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance last week or the week before when we talked to him. I guess that was the previous week, talking about the potential for this type of retaliation. CAFTA in the past has advocated for Canada to take more of an EU type approach, I believe. And the EU, their tariffs, instead of 100%, are up to 37%. And they actually did a bunch more math, actually showing how they came to those numbers. And that's where I think there is a case that Canada should have probably taken that type of strategy. At least then you have more of the theater showing that you're at least trying to be fair instead of just this arbitrary 100% number, round number.
So one of the other things that is different in this situation compared to the last issue with canola in China is how China is going about it. And Philip explained that as well. Here it is.
Well, key things to be watching. I think it's get back to canola, since that's kind of an important topic for your audience. It is interesting to note that the last time we saw this movie play, right, the Chinese were using SPS, so kind of phytosanitary, kind of food safety types of issues as the pretext for preventing Canadian imports. This time they're actually going more of a kind of classic trade policy approach, which is doing an anti-dumping investigation. So it's a little bit different, right? Both offer the opportunity for obfuscation and fancy footwork, but at the very least in this case, correct me if I'm wrong, but this type of investigation could take 4, 5, 6 months to wrap up, right? So in the meantime, it doesn't take effect, right?
And again, that was Philippe Rio. He is the director of the China Institute at the University of Alberta. So by taking this route, has China opened the door for Canada to change its mind on the EV? Have they bought Canada time, essentially? Or are we misinterpreting what China's move here is? And has the market overreacted? Lyndsey, you first quickly.
I don't think the market has overreacted, because I think the implications of this are huge. At the same time, the investigation has just started. Nothing has been decided. So we have to balance those two. The other, though, I would say, and to Rio's point, we talk about wanting rules-based trade. We talk about our partners, should abide by rules-based trade. And so, seeing something like this that is an investigation and a timeline should align better with what we want. But that is also a week after we imposed 100% tariffs on EVs without any work. So,
yeah.
Kelvin,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think exactly what Lyndsey said. There is potential here, as long as there isn't a if they actually give this due process, that's in Canada's favor. I'm not convinced that the Chinese government doesn't already have an outcome planned here in terms of what the hammer will be, that they have a hammer ready, I should say, for canola headed over there. But there are also some major questions being asked about where Chinese processors will get their canola from. There are also issues with Australian canola supplies, with concerns about blackleg and some of those phytosanitary issues that China raises with Australia. And so there could be pressure domestically. I know one of the reasons the Chinese Ministry of Commerce cited for this investigation was that there's financial losses happening among domestic processors or domestic industry, that they want to protect them. But at the same time, if they can't find supply of canola to keep their plants running, that type of thing, there could be domestic pressure too. So that's another factor to consider in all this.
Okay, we're going to park China for the time being, and we're going to get to another issue when we come back. Boy, there's not a happy relationship between the NDP and the Liberals. Does it mean we're going to have an election? Could we have like a Canadian election right after the American election? Can our brains take all of that news? We'll discuss when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, of course, on Sirius XM.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues Panel. Hey, protect your anhydrous ammonia and your bottom line. Good time to do that. Protect that bottom line even if temperatures hit 15 degrees or below. I hate that time of the year, but we got to protect that anhydrous ammonia. That's not too late to apply. Agronomically effective, non-corrosive Centuro nitrogen stabilizer. Learn more at centuro.ca. I know Lyndsey loves when it drops below 15 degrees. I don't know what's wrong with her. But
I'm Nordic. Whatever.
Quite. It's a big political news in Canada this week. But there's been lots of discussion about this. It's not a coalition government, Kelvin, in the definition, but they had an agreement between the NDP and the Liberals that really gave the Liberals cover to govern like a majority government. And the NDP are not in power, but had a lot of leverage. Did they get anything accomplished? We'll discuss that in a second. But that agreement is ripped up, torn up. It is thrown out. Goodbye. Just like, when the landowner comes in and says, hey, sorry, you can't rent the farm this year. I'm going a different direction. That kind of ripping it up. Now, the question is, will we see a Canadian election sooner than later? Because the Liberals no longer potentially have this agreement to give them the cover that they required. Kelvin, is there an election coming?
That is the big question, and I am going to say the odds are still no, that we won't have an election this fall. I think this might be underwhelming in terms of the actual impact we're going to see. I think we'll see the NDP continue to vote with the Liberals on a lot of issues of confidence. We're going to see the Conservatives try to make everything a confidence vote to make Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have to side with the Liberals, but I'm not convinced that the NDP really are wanting an election right now either. If you look at the popular vote, they are almost neck and neck, statistically tied with the Liberals for second place. But if you look at the seat count at 338.com and other places like that, the projected seat count would not be good for the NDP if there was an election right now. And so I don't know. It's going to be, to me, the whole thing looks like a very weak play. Like you said, the NDP did have a lot of leverage. Justin Trudeau has actually governed like an almost NDP prime minister the last couple of years with this agreement in place with some of the policies that the Liberals have advanced. They're not necessarily all over the finish line, but some of the, like the pharmacare and the dental care and those types of things. But right now, why pull the trigger right now? Why rip it up right now? And what, to me, the NDP look like they could be in a weak position here in fall if every vote gets brought to a confidence, or the Conservatives make every effort to bring every vote to a confidence vote, and they're just going to have to keep voting with the Liberals. That's going to be an awkward situation. So, yeah, to me, I'm not sure. And the whole narrative around why, to use that farm example, Shaun, if a landowner comes and says, going in a different direction, there's usually an explanation, some logic behind it. Why now? Why did the NDP pull it now? I haven't heard a compelling story or explanation for that.
Does it have to do with the rail strike? Are they unhappy what the government did there?
They're going after, they're kind of going after that Liberals need to be held accountable on siding with big corporate, big companies, but I don't know.
Now, after all, okay,
Exactly.
after all what has transpired, now we're like, oh, I can't take this anymore. This is like the straw that broke the camel's back after all the ethics violations and the other things that would be not really in particular interest to the NDP that they've just kind of gone along with. Now, like I agree. It's a bit of a
what's the reason?
Yeah. Lyndsey, election. What do you think?
So, I'm going to say no fall election, but I don't think we make it to next October. I think that it most likely I'm going with a spring election.
Yeah, I agree.
I will put it back though. Are we going to see proroguing of Parliament at any time? I heard an analyst bring that specter up yesterday, and I was like, hang on. So then I had to get back into when was the last time Parliament was prorogued, and start looking into that. Anyway, so that was one thing that I suppose came up. But I think we don't get to October, which is when we have to have an election. I think this government will end before that. So it does shorten this Parliament slightly, and ultimately the Liberal government. But I don't think we see one this fall. I too sort of wonder, like I could have seen, let's say we were still in this rail strike. Let's see, like the economy was going off the rails, pardon the pun, and there was all this, jockeying for position and who's got the unions back and whatever. And then Jugmeat comes out and says, like, we can't do this anymore. This has to happen, and putting the Liberals' feet to the fire and really a power move. Okay, cool. I guess I could kind of see it. But at this point, it almost feels like he's just doing what Poilievre suggested he do, which feels like kind of bullying anyway. And so I just don't know if he's just like buddying up with his next prime minister that he's going to work with. I don't know if that's his plan.
Okay, but if that is his plan, Lynn, like I think that makes sense. But they're not going to need the vote. They're not going to need
exactly
what the polling looks like.
That's why it doesn't make sense to me. Is that like realistically? I suppose yes, they're in opposition territory, but like you kind of were anyway. So
what do you guys think of the scenario where it's not the NDP and Conservatives that force an election, that it's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calling an election? I actually think he is more likely to call an election than to prorogue Parliament.
Like, get me the heck out of here kind of thing?
Yeah.
Possibly.
I believe
the government is running in limbo right now. Everything, people are checked out.
Right now? Did you say right now?
Well,
okay, well, we had some things happen this week that do definitely point to that. The third in command running out the door is one of them.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Continue.
Kelvin, continue.
I'm okay. So Jeremy Broadhurst, the Liberal campaign director, essentially third in importance in Team Trudeau, next to the Prime Minister himself and his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, announced this week that he is quitting with the campaign on the horizon, an election on the horizon, because he doesn't have the energy and devotion required to do the job. You have Trudeau's top Quebec Lieutenant Pablo Rodriguez, the transport minister, for weeks now has refused to deny that he's planning to run for the Quebec Liberal leadership as an upgrade on his job. And that's expected to be announced maybe after the by-election in 10 days in Montreal. And so you have MPs and people abandoning ship instead of rocking the boat here, I would say, to mix up two metaphors. And so that's where I think Trudeau is probably coming to awareness of his situation, and I wouldn't be surprised if, as a last thing that he can control, is his own exit, and it's by calling an election, I think, and maybe even I would think the leadership change would happen after that, but I don't, unless you think Trudeau steps down as leader and delays the election as long as possible that the Liberals can replace him. But either way, the next big thing to move here, I think, is Trudeau moving on.
My speculation on that would be he steps down before he goes through the process of taking a beating in the election. It's better for the brand post if he's like, you know what, the party needs a new leader. I'm going to step back. It's not about me. It's about the party. And the party needs to find the sacrificial lamb to just absolutely get run over by the Poilievre train in the election. He kind of reminds me right now, remember in Jerry Maguire, when he loses Cush the day before the draft, and they're sitting on the plane, he's drinking the bourbon and he's putting it back, and he's like, He's just like at his absolute low point. Like, what are you guys doing here with, what are you doing here with me, Rod? Rod, what are you doing here? I am a loser. And then he talks later on in regards to that, going through the election for Trudeau to take, based on what the polls are saying, would be a pride swallowing siege, to quote the movie. I don't see him doing it.
So, but okay, to counter that, although great reference, it's like a sports reference by proxy. So well done.
I do appreciate it.
Yeah. So thanks. But we have had this very discussion several times. Does he get out of the way and let somebody take over and let the change happen with enough time before the next election to actually turn this ship around of the Liberals that is sinking, with apologies to all involved, the rats are scurrying, all of those, metaphors, etc. Exactly. And we had this very conversation, and I think even I agreed that no, he's going to see this through. And now, so maybe this is the one thing that tearing up that agreement has done, is perhaps that is the straw that breaks the camel's back that says, okay, I'll step down. And perhaps there is enough time in this parliament with a new leader to hang on to at least seats. I don't even know if a minority would ever be in the cards, even with a year to go.
It's a rebuild.
Exactly. It's a rebuild, but you could start it before the next election as opposed to after it.
And in the meantime, it's in Canada's national interest to get this over with and move on, because
rip the Band-Aid.
We are like living in limbo right now in this I don't know what's the term used in the US again, Shaun, now when there's
lame
an election,
duck?
but
lame duck.
Lame duck, exactly. We in many ways have a lame duck government right now. We have CUSMA USMCA review on the horizon. And this government has no energy or new ideas. And if we're going to have any success in those negotiations, because it's likely going to be more than a review, it's likely going to be a renegotiation, we need to be preparing for that. And that's one thing where I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Perrin Beatty of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and talked about how we still don't have a lead negotiator appointed. We don't have a lot of the processes and procedures and working groups in place, the structure, the storylines, the narratives, all the different points that the messaging that Canada is going to use in this renegotiation. And right now we have a government and top bureaucrats that aren't inspired. There isn't energy. If you look at the last NAFTA renegotiation, we had a new Liberal government that had tons of energy, staffers that were excited to work in government and had ideas and wanted to get things done. It's almost an opposite situation right now. And so it's in Canada's national interest to, I think, rip the Band-Aid off here and let's move on. Let's get on with the inevitable is on the horizon. Let's get past it.
Which makes it different than the US situation with Biden stepping down. Biden was fully willing to go through the loss. Yeah. Okay. In this situation, I think it's a weak comparison to compare what Biden did versus what you think Trudeau should do. I think they're totally different situations, and the motivation is different. And also, it's kind of in this situation, it's really up to Prime Minister Trudeau what he wants to do for himself or the party, depending on how you look at it. Okay, we got to take a break. We'll be back with more of the RealAg Issues Panel. We got some other topics to get to, like what is going on with the Canadian economy. We also got U.S. jobs numbers, interest rates, and a whole lot more. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Whether you're in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, running your own farm operation, operating a company in ag or food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Niagara Falls on November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
And welcome Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And a big shout out to everybody also listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. The answer to your above ground nitrogen loss problem is Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvil's dual active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, all of Real Agriculture, breaking down the biggest issues of the week. I've got a question for the both of you before we get to anything economic-wise. Question. I know a lot of farmers deal with this question. This is a common one that happens across the country and in the U.S. Young couple gets married. They come back to the farm. They say to mom and dad, I'd like to build a house. Is one better to build a house on the home yard, on the farm, build that house on a subdivided quarter? Or what about in town? I'm interested in your perspective. I have some strong thoughts. Kelvin, what do you say?
Well, this is very real for me. I would say that from a net worth perspective, you're probably best off building in town and having a house that has resale value. But it depends on your priorities, I think, in your situation. And so, for us, having young family and the lifestyle part of it, I certainly value being able to see my kids and wife at lunch and that type of thing, and coming inside and being around each other, having them witness what we do on the farm, that type of thing. I like the idea of having the house on the yard, on the farm, even though the value of the home whenever we ever decide to leave, if we do, might not be as strong as if it was in town.
Lyndsey, Kelvin is a true family man.
He really is. Well, we already knew that. He has like 12 kids.
No, he doesn't. Stop spreading rumors.
There's only one set of twins, you guys. It's amazing. So I think you skipped over one thing, though, and this would make it far too controversial for the show, and we won't touch on it, is who moves into the new house. Do mom and dad get the new build, or do the young couple get the old, and a young couple get the farmhouse?
That can be a real fight.
That could be a real fight. So let's assume here we're talking about, it's time for the farmhouse to be updated, and that's what we're, and it is the young couple. I will have to say that it does certainly depend on the situation, depending on, like in Kelvin's case, there's livestock on site, and we have livestock. And so for me, I would say that yes, financially probably makes far more sense on the grand scheme of things to build in town if town is close, but having livestock on site, distance really does cause some issues. So I can definitely see where it would have to be very close to do it. That being said, if it were a grain farm and it kind of doesn't matter, town, 100%.
Neither of you said subdivided quarter. Like that's strategically.
That depends. Is it a subdivided quarter right adjacent to town where it would have high resale value, or in the middle of nowhere?
Or, again, where mom and dad's staying, are they staying on the farm? Maybe you don't want to be that close to your mom and dad. And is there a quarter that's, a mile away, 2 miles away? Is that far enough? For some people, that's not far enough. So, and for good reason. Yeah.
Well,
so, yeah.
Well, this is personal for me as well. As it's, before we sold our farm, we built a house on the home quarter, which I say we should build in town, because my wife wanted to live on the farm, and it was great to be on the farm, and we enjoyed it. But when the business plan changes and ended up selling that quarter, house got to go with it. So it's a real upheaval, right? So you got to. I think it's a really tough decision. Everyone has a right and a wrong, but you do need to think about long-term stuff too, like what happens if, and sometimes it's easy to say, oh, that'll never happen, but you got to consider some of those alternatives for sure. I think that's a good poll question at some point.
Yes.
Right?
It will show up at some point.
If anybody's really passionate about it, you can definitely send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You know what? We're going to take a break. Yes, because we still have one more segment, and we need to really dive into a few more issues before we end today's show, and we'll do that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Apply anhydrous ammonia and protect your application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient Pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. Easy to handle Centuro is also non-corrosive for fewer worries about downtime or equipment damage. Start early with Centuro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues Panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And we're back here on RealAg Radio. These holiday weeks, Labor Day on Monday, and I know a lot of people are busy in the field and all that kind of stuff, but it's a short week around here, and it feels rushed. It's a short, rushed week, and lots happened this week as well. And thanks so much for joining us here today on the program. Here's an important notice for you. It seems like we've done a few of these as of late. Important notice for grain farmers. The Canadian Grain Commission has revoked the licenses of Purely Canada Foods Corp. If this company owes you money for grain deliveries, call 1-800-853-6705 immediately. This is a message from the government of Canada. Now, Kelvin, why should they do that? Like, what's the purpose of that notice?
Well, if you're owed money, the Canadian Grain Commission has its producer payment security program that we've talked about here the last couple of weeks with the news of this case again. And there is a pot of money. The bond that the company had to put up with the CGC will hopefully cover the grain that has been delivered and not paid for. But that, I think, is remained to be seen. That will be determined in the coming months here. But if you're owed money, they should have put up a bond for it through the Canadian Grain Commission.
Yeah, Lyndsey, go ahead.
I just want to add to that, there is a time limit. So
yes.
Oh, that's why the ASAP part.
That's why the ASAP part. You only have 90 days.
From when you delivered, right?
No, I think it's from, there are like several different scenarios and it's whichever one, but basically like longest you have is like 90 days to put in your claim. Okay, so and basically what that means is so that the CGC can basically put a deadline, they take all those claims and then they put that against the bond. So, it is not guaranteed that that the bond will cover everything that's owed. That's one of the criticisms of the program. It has in the past, but the key is if anyone is owed that money, it is very important to get your name on that list so that you will be considered for that payout from that bond that was put up. So
a very good point.
Yes.
Okay, that number again, 1-800-853-6705. That is if you have a grain contract with Purely Canada Foods Corp. Okay. Let's move on. Lyndsey, here's some, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, so to speak, but I do not like what I'm hearing from a lot of Western Canadian farmers. Now, what I've been saying, here's the question I've been asking on the Farmer Rapid Fire. How are yields relative to your expectations? And because I think it's more accurate than, are yields average or above average, below average? And what I'm hearing a lot of, they're actually below my expectations. I don't like that. It doesn't sound good, Lyndsey.
No, and I think it is a good way to frame it, right? In that we watch a crop, we watch the weather, we scout, we know what we put in for nutrients, we know what we have for rain, and I think especially for, let's say, canola, but we've seen it on the cereals too, the combines start rolling and the yield monitor is just not where we expected it to be. I know many farmers that I have spoken with, it really was that incredible heat at the perfectly wrong time that seemed to roll through. For some other farmers, it was the tap turning off at exactly the wrong time. So to that point, timing is everything. Absolutely. And unfortunately, there was some decent yield potential out there, and either a lack of rain or that just extreme heat at flowering wiped out a lot of crop potential. And it's really sad and really frustrating.
And is it fair to say, Lyndsey, that, and you correct me here if I've got this wrong, but my perception is as the weeks have gone on, the central and eastern Canadian farmer is kind of raising their expectations. At least that seems to be the kind of what I'm hearing. And maybe, is that maybe unfair?
I don't know. I think I don't know if I can make that much of a generalization because, and Kelvin, I don't know what you've seen in Manitoba, but I certainly have spoken with some farmers in Manitoba who their wheat yields are depressing.
Okay,
Like,
but what about Ontario and the America?
oh, like
Yeah.
where we are?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are at like this very strange spot right now with the corn and the soybeans in that I think we still have excellent yield potential for both. Corn is probably a little more locked in just because of how the year has gone. But beans, there's still like grass green beans out there, and we have cooled off quite a bit. And the corn crop, I think, was in a much better spot for losing these growing degree days, at least where I am. But the beans they have a long way to go. So that's around where I am. There's still, I think, the potential of a really good crop. It will just all depend on how open of a fall we get. Other areas of Ontario, excellent yield potential, and people are pretty excited about it. It really will all come down to how this finishes in the next couple of weeks, for sure.
We had some economic news this week, and I guess we got Bank of Canada dropping the key lending rate by 25 points. We're still waiting for a decision by the Federal Reserve and what they're doing. We had jobs numbers out in Canada and the U.S. here today. The U.S. jobs number disappointed for sure. Kelvin, what did the Canadian jobs number look like?
Canadian jobs number was up. So employment rose 22,000 in August. But if you look below the surface, there was a decrease in full-time employment. Number of full-time jobs dropped by 44,000. That was offset by a 66,000 increase in part-time jobs. So I don't know about you, but to me, full-time employment is probably always better than part-time employment for overall economic output. So maybe not as rosy as that headline 22,000 increase. At the same time, though, unemployment rate is up now, the highest it's been in Canada since 2017, pre-pandemic. That's not counting a couple of months during the pandemic there, of course. It's now up to 6.6% from 6.4% in July. And so another sign that the economy is slowing down, as the Bank of Canada has kind of been anticipating. And so and inflation has come down with a large exception of housing costs. And so I expect we'll continue to see the Bank of Canada to continue to cut rates here probably 2 more times before the end of the year is what the market's expecting.
Yeah. How inflation has slowed in terms of Bank of Canada, some of the commentary was, we don't want it to blow past that 2% number. That's their target. What is that? Does that matter when it comes to the politics around parties campaigning around inflation at all? Or is that too much in the weeds?
So, you know what? That's a good question because I think, and Kelvin, cover your ears. Most economic policy bores most of us to tears. And that's
half of this.
Sorry, guys, it's true. So, you asked in the political scheme, so in a campaign and whatever. So realistically, and this does matter, that the conversation right now, and Pierre Poilievre has been using this as his platform of affordability, right? And so if things become more affordable, does that take a bit of the wind out of the sails on that one? At the same time, just because inflation is slowing, and no, we don't want to enter recession territory.
You don't want deflation.
No, we don't want but don't we? Because for people trying to pay their bills, deflation sounds like a really good idea. Until you realize it's actually not. Again, people don't love economic policy. So, hang
on, Lyndsey. You're sounding like somebody that said people don't think about monetary policy, right?
Yeah, you sort of sound like the
They
president.
just care about how they can afford things. So my point, Kelvin, you'll be proud of me on this one, that although inflation is slowing, we still have inflated prices. So it is still difficult because we went through so much inflation. Prices are still high and affordability is still an issue. So I don't think for a moment that we're suddenly going to snap our fingers and be in a position where affordability isn't a hot topic. Because as much as, see, I'm right, I agree with you both, but it is true that even if inflation slows, we still are at inflated prices and affordability is still an issue. That's not going to go away. It's still going to be a huge talking point into this winter, into this campaign, whenever it may happen. It's still going to be an issue.
Well,
so Lyndsey, I think it's just a matter of language that you're talking about affordability being a hot topic. Economics people don't care about, but affordability is important. It's the same reason why Pierre Poilievre talks about paychecks. He doesn't talk about jobs or job creation. He talks about powerful paychecks or whatever his terminology is.
Well, deflation not good for paychecks. because that leads to layoffs because
That's right. So
overall profitability goes down.
people are going to lose
And higher
jobs.
unemployment like this.
It's like
this job
words
today.
matter, you guys. It's like words matter.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Anyway.
Kelvin, article in the Hub, sticking on the economic front, article in the Hub by Trevor Toome talking about the gap in GDP per capita between Canada and the U.S. It is at all-time high, or what's the duration there?
It's the highest in, I believe, a century, possibly all the way.
Okay.
He says we're within reach of John A. Macdonald time frame, like the founding of Canada time frame in terms of the gap.
Okay, all-time high. That's pretty good.
I had looked at those numbers.
It doesn't. Good. Not good for Canada. Not
good for us. And really bad for those of us in Ontario.
So
it's terrible.
Why though? And of course I'm joking, but why?
Well, a big part of this, it has to do with productivity and output, and those are big questions that I'm not sure we all have a consensus on what the answers are here. But this is based on, so Trevor Toome's been doing this analysis with every StatsCan GDP report, and we saw new GDP numbers for the second quarter. We talked about them on last week's Issues Panel, I believe. Real GDP per capita in the U.S., so he's done all the conversions based on purchasing power here so that it accounts for the cost of things as well, and inflation, that Lyndsey's favorite topic. In the U.S. right now, real GDP per capita stands at around just over $66,000 in 2015 dollars, so adjusted for inflation, compared to in Canada, 44,000. So we're within reach now of that gap widening to nearly 50%, which just seems staggering in terms of that affordability issue. And the why is the big question. Why is it so different in Canada versus the U.S.?
Well, I find it interesting. I looked at some of the tweets from the Hub on this, and one of the Canadian things that I notice is our ability to come up with all of the excuses in the book to excuse-splain why this is happening instead of actually being like, what do we need to do? But that's kind of a Canadian thing, I think, and it needs to stop. We're adjacent, and we have the adjacency advantage, and still this gap is growing. It's concerning. So, okay, we are flat out of time, you guys. We got to run. Oh my goodness. Okay, Lyndsey, I know you'll be watching NFL football on Sunday. Who are you cheering for this year?
The one with the animal team. Yeah.
That's whoa, come on.
I always pick an animal over anything else. Anyway.
So what happens when the Lions and the Bears play?
Well, then you have to think about a lion and a bear, and then it comes down to colors. So then it's always the Lions because they're blue.
Whoa. Well, so are the Bears. The Bears are blue too. Kelvin, we're not getting to the bottom of this at all.
No, you're not.
Kelvin, who are you cheering for this year? Who's your team?
Oh man, I haven't had time to pay attention to football, to NFL yet.
Just pick one.
We're still riding on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers win over the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the Labor Day Classic.
No idea what you're talking about. It's Bears all the way. We are making the Super Bowl.
Bears.
Caleb Williams in we trust, baby. It's going to be a great year. Go Bears. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Want your feedback on what the NDP did this week, as well as where should you build that house? On the home quarter, or in town, or maybe on a subdivided one. Let us know how you feel, or maybe what you did. Did you regret it? Or was the best decision you ever made? We'd love to hear that feedback. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And we'll, of course, chat again on Monday. Cheers, everybody.